Hey Jay, I got a knock knock joke for you.
Oh boy, here we go.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting host.
Oh, is this like interrupting Cal?
Welcome to Inspector Toolbelt Talk.
Oh, yeah. Uh, Interrupting host. Here we go. Well, started off
So
right.
I felt it was an appropriate introduction to one of my favorite segments, drinking with Jay.
Oh,
So, for all of our listeners who already didn't have to pee,
yeah.
you
That's,
might you might have to pee
that's
now.
what I was thinking.
But
Are we in the barn?
but I swear we just started. So we have this segment around because Jay and I are friends, and some of our best conversations come from sitting around a fire and drinking a glass of whiskey. So today we're going to talk about mentoring and teaching inspectors. And we're going to do that to a nice glass of whatever we happen to be drinking. So let's start off with you, Jay. What are you drinking
So
tonight?
I'm going low end. Somebody told me to try Jim Beam, and I thought Jim Beam. No, I'm not. But they said no. Go with the extra age dark, and it's a lower end, but it's got a lot of flavor, and it's actually really pretty good. So that's kind of what I've been playing with. Um, we used to have a thing where a lot of people would try to buy a really expensive bottle or whatever, and we kind of went the other way. We'd try to find really good whiskeys that were really affordable. So this was kind of in that vein. I thought, well, let's try it. So Jim Beam Extra Dark, and I like it.
You know, depending on where you were getting your whiskey, that's what American whiskey was all about. Was making it affordable and available. Well, that and distilling in the hills and just doing whatever the heck you want. But during the distilling era of moonshiners, you'd make some corn whiskey, do it in the woods, and you'd kind of basically just do that as an affront to all the Scotch whiskeys and everything being imported to the U.S. and only certain people being able to afford that on a regular basis. So something to be said about a cheaper whiskey.
Well, I like good. That's the problem. That's why I don't think I could ever be a real alcoholic because I just don't like cheap stuff. So
Yeah. What what's your go-to whiskey for just like I call it a Thursday night whiskey?
Thursday
Like
night
I'm
whiskey,
just sitting here.
I like Jameson Black Barrel. I really like that
Oh,
one. It's darker. It's got a nice flavor to it. So that one's kind of been my go-to for years, but this one's pretty close.
my wife likes that a lot. She drinks it straight. It's very
Yeah,
smooth.
yeah, and it's like people.
That's actually
It's a good one. It's a good go-to.
yeah
I try to have a bottle of that around. I'm probably going to try to keep a bottle of this around now.
yeah. No, I. So repeat for me again. Which whiskey you're drinking tonight?
Jim Beam Extra Dark.
Jim Beam Extra Dark. My Thursday night whiskey is usually Bullet Bourbon.
Okay, that's solid.
I like a good bourbon.
Yep.
Yeah, you really can't go wrong. Bourbon on its own, sometimes people call it rough or aggressive. Like it gives you acid reflux because it's the corn in it. But Bullet, I don't get that from the Bullet. I think it's nice and smooth. But tonight, I might have even drank this on our last episode. I'm drinking Lagavulin 11 year in the charred oak cask. So if Lagavulin wasn't peaty enough,
Mm.
let's make it peatier by making the casks a little bit more charred. But it is nice. It was a gift from a good friend of mine, um, Jacob Colgrove and his wife Abby. They gave me a bottle of this, and I have been enjoying it. It's very nice. My favorite brand.
Yeah, you got your little Swanson tribute going there.
Oh yeah, you gotta live up the Ron when you
Oh,
can. So speaking of Ron Swanson, something that people might not know about you is you are a lumberjack slash woodworker. A little bit of both there. How's the mill going? You mill anything good lately?
I have not been milling anything good lately. I got a big maple sitting on deck, and I've just been doing other stuff, so I haven't had time to run it. Actually, the big problem is because we haven't had a frost, the area in front of the mill is a big mud hole. So if I pull the tractor in there, it just gets all tore up. So because of the weather, it's been really hard to move around. So I'm not inclined to move boards by hand too much anymore. So till it hardens up or till it thaws out and goes away, I'm probably not going to run the mill much. But I love it.
So I think you're a good example for all of us as home inspectors. If you're a home inspector and all you do is work, stop for a moment and think you could be out there at the end of a hard day cutting up boards out of a tree that you felled with your own bare hands,
And an axe.
and then build something afterwards. Yeah, build something with it afterwards, and then go have a glass of whiskey like Jay Wynn.
Well, sounds very macho.
It does, yeah.
Oh,
But today, you actually brought up this subject, and before we get into the subject, I do want to say, I get a ton of requests for a drinking segment now. Like, a lot of guests will be like, hey, I heard you have a drinking segment. Can I get in on that? And I'm like, we don't provide the alcohol. They're like, no, it's okay. I just want to drink alcohol on air. I'm like, I think I started something.
I think you may have.
So, but you wanted to talk about mentoring and teaching inspectors, and I think this is an appropriate subject for you. You and I have worked with a lot of home inspectors over the years, and you especially. I think you've probably mentored and done ride-alongs with more inspectors than I have, even. But it's kind of rare because when I first started in the industry almost 20 years ago now, nobody wanted to give me a ride-along.
Yeah.
No one even wanted to answer a question. At the time, it was ASHI in the area, and the ASHI guys were always like, oh, if you want to learn something, come to our meetings. You go to a meeting, and they were like, what's this guy doing here? Don't talk about any of our secrets. I'm like, this is not helpful. So I kind of had to learn on my own, and it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
You kind of want to change that a little bit. Can you tell me why?
Well, actually, very much so. And I think it's because I come from a trades background. Very much, almost, if you will, the apprentice master kind of idea is that if you got something and you know something really, really well, you kind of have an obligation to pass it along and to share that. And then when I was coming up in the trades, is that if I could work with somebody that really knew their trade, I really wanted to learn what they had. And a lot of those guys guarded their knowledge pretty close, and a lot of them were real tight to the vest with things. But after a while, and you proved that you were in it for the long haul, that you weren't going to just pack up and run away, they would open up and start showing you tricks that either you would never have figured out on your own, or it would have taken you years to figure out. So the old guys were really just a wealth of information to tap into. And as a young guy, I mean, you can not only do better work, but you can shave years off your learning curve. And I think at the end of the day, just put out a better product. And one of the things that I saw, like you said, when I was coming in, guys were so guarded about what they knew, like it was some magic secret. And my thought was, this isn't helping the industry. This isn't helping where we're going. It's keeping everybody kind of backwards and isolated, when if we can just pool and share what we know, everybody's going to be better. The old guys are going to be better. The young guys coming up are going to be better. And it's kind of something that I've done it a couple of times. I should say after I did it a couple of times, I was pretty convinced that it's a really solid way to go. Take guys that really want to learn, take them in, teach them as much as you can, help them get a leg up, help them get started, and go from there.
I think even past the moral obligation of it, because I think that's important. You know, if we know our profession, we should pass on the knowledge. Imagine a doctor saving all his tricks and not teaching new doctors, and new doctors having to relearn things. The profession never gets better. But past the moral obligation, I always kind of viewed it as controlling the narrative. So we're not only talking about mentoring directly, like, hey, come with me on this inspection, but teaching inspectors. I remember one of the first inspection courses that I taught. One of the guys came up to me and said, thank you so much. I always wondered about this. I always wondered about that. I didn't hold back. Everything that I did, I just let it out. And I had one guy come up to me, I can't believe you're telling you guys this. Like, one of them was a contract thing that had an attorney write up for me. I spent money on it. And guys were writing it down. And he's like, you shouldn't be sharing that stuff. You earned that. You earned the right for that. And I'm like, man, those are two different perspectives. Yeah. This guy's just like, hold your secrets tight. And the other guy's like, thank you very much. Yeah. So what I did was I just continued to do that. And you've been to my courses and you teach very similar courses. We just let it all out. But what ended up happening for me is I always hated I call out this and the other guy doesn't call it out. And everybody gets into an angry fit. Why did Ian call it out and not this guy? Or why did this guy call it out and not Ian? What I started to notice was we started to level out our industry in our area. Yeah. Guys were more consistent. They started to kind of follow the lead of what we were teaching in the courses and on the ride-alongs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you follow this? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we always call that out because this and this and this can happen. And I would learn stuff from them. So we actually kind of started to I hate that term, controlling the narrative, but that's kind of what happened. Was we created a bit of consistency, and to be frank, a higher standard. Guys were out there just missing things.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Pushing for a higher standard was my take on it. It's like there are guys that want to keep things to themselves, keep things tight, and I get that. You don't want to train your competition, which is potentially what we're doing. So I do understand that. I have some arguments against that, but I understand at that perspective. I think it's a little limited. I think it's very short-sighted. But the thing that I notice is that if we can improve the standard of the inspectors out there, and everybody can just push to do a little bit better job, our industry has a better reputation. And now, one of the byproducts of that I found is that instead of walking up and people going, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's just the inspector. But now it's like over the last few years, when you show up and you're doing this inspection, people go, no, he knows his stuff. He is the inspector. And there's just like a subtle shift, but it's kind of a big deal. They don't downplay our role as much as not only what we've done is, I think, frankly, in our area improved the quality inspections, but I think as agents are coming to expect more from our inspectors in our area. And I think that's a win-win-win.
Yeah, so we're going to take this maybe from two perspectives. The perspective of, we'll talk about in a little bit, of guys coming up, wanting mentorship. But let's talk a little bit about the guys like you and me who have been in it for a bit. Why we hold back sometimes. So let's talk about that. But I think you made a beautiful point, and I think it comes down to street cred. So I remember one time I was on an inspection, and at this time, half a dozen guys have, learned from me directly, hundreds of guys through my classes. And I remember I called something out, and one of the agents started to say, well, I've never had this come up before, and we're not going to negotiate on it. And I could hear the other agent say, Ian teaches a course on this. I think he knows what he's talking about. And it's happened many times, like other inspectors, like another agent sent me an email chain. He goes, I got to show you this, Ian. Another inspector said, oh, Ian called that out? I literally learned how to do this from him. Yeah. He knows what he's talking about. Shut it right down. So it's street cred.
Same thing with me. I've had agents go, and this is after I started teaching, after I started helping guys license up. I've had agents that were basically attacking my credentials, trying to put down and downplay what I was calling out. I've had my buyer's representatives go, this guy is teaching other home inspectors. He knows his stuff. And it's amazing how it just shuts that conversation right down. So, and then the agents that work with me and refer me go, great. There's one conversation I don't have to have because I picked the right inspector. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I like about it is guys that mentor and ride along and train with me, if they get in the field and get in a pickle, they can call me too. So, sometimes I'll get a phone call from an inspector that I've been working with. He's like, hey, I've never seen this before. What is it? So the agents are more apt to refer them because they know that they have, kind of a access to what I know too. So I think it's just a win-win-win. I mean, it keeps your name out there. If you're looking for a straight selfish reason to do it, it keeps your name front and center. I mean, if you're the guy teaching all the guys out there, that's a pretty good position to be in, so that when you make a call, it tends to be much more definitive. It's, like you said, it ends that conversation to a very large degree.
Yeah, and as Jay put it, that is one marketing / quote-unquote selfish reason to do it. It is amazing marketing. So if you don't believe in the whole betterment of our industry, like me and Jay may be here, and you're just like, I'm just looking to market, it is incredible marketing. I had a home inspector just today message me, sent me 2 pictures and said, hey, have you seen this before? I said, what area are you in? Okay, I know that area. Check for this and this. Cool. That inspector's not ever going to throw me under the bus. He's only going to say good things about me. And you know what? Say I'm a single inspector firm and I break my leg and I can't go to an inspection that afternoon. Guess who's going to back me up?
Yeah.
He's going to be like, I got you, Ian.
So I think,
right? We've done that for each other.
Oh yeah. And the guys that I've helped teach have my back, and I got theirs. So I think that's the other reason to really do it. The other selfish reason to do it is you're building a strong community of people around you that can really help you out. Because I don't care who you are, unless you got the big red S on your chest, you can't do everything all the time, and you can't be everywhere all the time. Cultivating these relationships and having 3 or 4 other guys that you really like and can trust that you can say, hey, I need a radon done. This is what happened. Can you help me out? Septic is, I've got a septic inspection I need help with. If we have that, you can tap into. That's a beautiful thing. It takes some of this. I'm a single inspector. I like what I do, but it can get very lonely out there. And sometimes it's just you get overwhelmed by the workload. It's nice to have a couple of guys that are willing to help out.
Yeah, I remember one time I had an inspection where the radon test, people dropped it on the floor, cans broke open, whatever, many, many years ago. One of the guys that I had worked with and taught, I got you covered, Ian.
Yeah.
I'm right around the corner.
Yeah.
Agents, it's like, wow, you have like a whole network of people.
Yeah.
I was a young guy. I'm just like, I'm like, geez, that's an hour and a half away. I got to drive all the way up there. He's like, don't worry, I got you.
Yeah.
And he took care of it. And, when he needed help, I went and took care of what he needed.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful networking system, and it just makes life a lot easier. You're not flying solo out there because you have a network of guys. You're not fighting other home inspectors, which, let's be honest, it happens.
Oh, yeah.
You do a pre-listing inspection as a home inspector. The next guy that comes in is the buyer inspector, and all of a sudden you have two people fighting over stuff.
Yeah.
That's how it used to be years ago.
Yeah, and I've done it. I've done pre-listing inspections, frankly, where the inspector coming behind is an old grizzled veteran, and he's been around for a long time, and frankly, he doesn't particularly like me or how I'm doing things, and they always nitpick stuff and try to find stuff, and well, he didn't call this out, and this is, of course, a major, and then you get the phone call, and you just talk with your client, said you walk them through it, and they pretty much can see through it. So, but for the most part, it's a and I'm not going to say it's going to resolve every issue you're going to run into, because there's some guys out there that are just set in their ways. They insist that their way is the only way of doing things, and they feel like they have earned what they've got, and they don't want anybody to come close to it. So I still have a little conflict with those kind of people, but for the most part, I find guys in the industry are really pretty open to talking about things, to helping other people, and to sharing the tricks of the trade. Especially when it comes to bringing up some younger blood, but even as peers. I just had a phone call today with a guy who's a mold assessor and a home inspector in our area. And he called me up and said, hey, this is the situation I've run into. And we had over an hour's conversation about things in general. He's seen my work. He's seen my reports. He knows I do septic inspections. He's actually been on to a class or two. And he called me out of the blue and said, hey, this is what I ran into. Have you ever seen this? And it was just a great conversation. Again, there's another contact that I've been able to make. So comfortable calling him in the future if I have a question about something he's doing or something out his way. I think it just works for everybody. I have my philosophy though is this, and this is where I come from. I really think that if you're trying to be the best that you can be, if you're always trying to improve your craft, if you're always trying to write a better report, if you're always trying to do a better inspection and just be on top of your game, I really feel like at some point you can no longer have competition. You can only have peers. And I don't know. That's my attitude on things. And I really try to be in that group.
So, and that's a beautiful point. There's a morality part of it. So let's get out of the marketing / let's just say we're all business. Those are all good business reasons to have a network. And one last thing about that, I guess, is overflow work.
Yeah.
So inspectors that I know and that I've mentored, I will send them work.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Oh, man, we're too busy this week. Yeah. And then, you know what? There's been times where I'm like, oh, man, we're a little slow this week. And all of a sudden, work comes in, and the referral source is 2 or 3 home inspectors that I've taught over the years. Hey, I'm on vacation. This is my client. Done 2 other inspections for him. Take good care of him. I only refer him to you. It is a beautiful business decision to teach and mentor other home inspectors. Teach classes, continuing education or otherwise. Take guys along and ride along.
Yes. So, no, I was going to that point, I was at an office presentation, and agents are so used to when a home inspector comes in, hearing I'm the greatest thing in the world, refer me, I'm the best thing you'll ever do. My presentation was a lot different, though. It was this is the information you're going to need. But one of the agents was trying to set me up. He's like, so you're the only inspector in the area that's doing something like this, right? And you could tell when it's a loaded question. My reply was, no, actually, I know 5 or 6 guys in the area that are doing really great inspections that I'd be more than happy for you to work with. And I went through and I named them. I said, this is a great guy. This is a great guy. This is a great guy. I like how they do things. And literally the broker goes, whoa, hold on. You just gave us 4 other home inspectors, 4 other guys. And you named them. I said, absolutely. They're good guys. I said, what I want is I want you to be using very good inspectors to take care of your people. Blew the whole office away. I got more referrals out of them than you can imagine, just because I didn't walk in there and these guys don't know anything, but I am the smartest. It was just like, no, these are the guys you want. I mean, I'm serious.
Is that how they really? Is that how they really sound?
That's how they really
do that
sound.
Again. It's even better when you hear the ice clanking in the glass in the background.
But it drives me nuts. Everybody wants to talk about how good they are. If guys, the thing is, I learned from some really good people in the industry, and I appreciated that. And their guys are still working out there, and I learned a lot from them, and they were nice to have available. So I appreciate that. I just think it's a good idea to pass it along.
So that being said, let's talk about the morality of our industry. So one thing that I notice is when I talk with some older inspectors, and I guess there's young guys out there thinking, Ian and Jay, you are the older inspectors.
Yeah.
But there's guys out there that are, we're getting there. But I see that old school mentality of holding the secrets and all that. But then those same guys complain about the degradation of our industry. Like this one guy was just like going at it one day, and he was like, our industry's falling apart. These new guys, they don't know a thing. And he keeps going off. Finally, I'm like, then tell him. Mm-hmm. Tell them everything that you know so that they know. Well, they have to figure it out for themselves. I'm like, that's stupid. What teacher ever comes into school and says these kids just need to figure this out for themselves?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. But here's the thing. I was thinking about this. I think a lot of the older guys, and like myself included, come from a trades background, right? And let's be honest. Mm-hmm. I don't remember which podcast it was on. Oh, yes, I do. It was on Facebook etiquette. You were talking about when you were surveying with your uncle.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sitting there and going, yeah, that sounds really familiar. It's like you wake up in the morning and you come into work and it's, hey, moron, you're 10 minutes late when you're really 15 minutes early. And that was how you started the day. And so I was thinking about it, is a lot of us cut our teeth in that environment where that's what you expected. And it just kind of bounced off us. And it did serve one purpose that I could think of, and that was it helped to weed out the people that couldn't cut it. The old grizzled guys, the old grizzled miserable people, they didn't have time to waste on somebody that wasn't going to stick around and wasn't going to get the job done. So part of the way they thinned the herd was by being just brutal to them. I think there's a lot more downside to it, but that was one thing that I think that happened. So I think a lot of us went through that in the trades and growing up and learning, and I think a lot of us carry that through, especially as I see with the old guys. It's like they want to punish all the young guys till they've had their stripes, till they show what they're worth, and then they're willing to open up. And I get why it may have happened, but I don't think we're there anymore. I think we need to move past it.
Yeah, because here's the fallacy of that kind of thinking, in my opinion. So you're weeding out the herd, but you may have had a really good inspector that you just treat like garbage, and then he moves on to a different career and becomes a really good person, tradesman or professional in another career, and we lose him in the inspection industry.
Yeah.
But then you keep the one guy that can handle you. So it's not a matter of being able to handle the person, being able to handle who's mentoring you. You know what I mean?
It's a matter of... I do.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a great way to go. In fact, there's many more on that frog than there is anything else. But that was one thing I was thinking, that why the old school tradesmen did so much of that, I think, anyway. And I'm talking about, I learned from old guys that were like you, like your uncle, kind of. So,
well, so I guess it comes down to there was this one guy that said if you took all the money away from everybody in the world and you handed everybody, $10, the people that made all that money to begin with will make all that money again, and the people that lost that money will lose it. So it was basically a philosophy in life. If you give 100 people everything you know, the people that weren't going to use it anyways disappear, and that knowledge it just goes away. It's not like you told them a secret that now some lazy jerk that doesn't know what he's going to do steals it and runs a successful business.
So
Instead,
yeah,
the people that would have stuck it out anyways would take that knowledge and build on it and appreciate it. So we don't need to have that same crass attitude.
no,
We can give it freely because there's nobody stolen our business from teaching inspectors, and the guys that have done really well were guys that were going to do well anyways. We just gave them a good foundation, and now they're our peers, people that we work with and not against.
I have noticed that too. I think it was Kevin Maxwell when he was on said that out of the 30 guys in his group, only 2 of them ever became full-time home inspectors. When I went through my class, there were 23 of us that got our license about the same time. I'm the only one. You know, the fallout rate is huge in our industry. So if you got somebody that's going to be around and is going to be there anyway, why not guide them? Why not help them? Why not put them on your side instead of against you?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. The other thing that I think about is there was an occasion it was vermiculite in an attic. So if you don't know this, in New York State, New York State came out with a letter saying we don't care what the test of vermiculite is. You can have a lab test it, but the New York State stance is we assume that all vermiculite has asbestos in it. So I have a copy of the letter. I would actually provide it sometimes when people would start throwing up a stink when I call out vermiculite. So home inspector comes in and says, "Oh yeah, this is rock insulation, or this and that." He wrote down some weird stuff, took a sample, sent it to a lab in Massachusetts because the New York lab said no, we don't test that anymore. Here's a letter. Sent it to a lab in Massachusetts. I knew the guy, and he was just like, oh, I didn't know any of this. I'm like, you've been an inspector for years. We find vermiculite almost weekly around here in our area, and he just didn't know. So now it turned into this whole thing. If he had just known. So I explained it to him. I talked with him. I gave him the letter, and he's like, geez, man, I'm sorry. I'm like, no, we can't take it all back. Don't worry, the attorney. Then the attorneys all figured it out, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, we just got to remove the stuff. It was like $30,000 at the time. That was like 10 years ago. It's probably more now. But if we don't want that kind of stuff to happen, we have to teach. It makes our industry that much better when guys know what they're doing. Because how often do you hear, Jay, people say things about home inspectors all the time. Bunch of idiots. Yep. Washed out contractor. That's my favorite one. Some guy who couldn't cut it at McDonald's. Mm-hmm. Just sometimes we have we take pride. I take pride in my industry. Yeah. You take pride in your industry. And then we work really hard to have a bunch of people talk bad about us because there's some guys out there that weren't taught, that weren't shown. And maybe they have potential. So we need to elevate our industry. There's my little soapbox speech. It's a morality thing.
Well, that's okay with the soapbox speech, but I think the advantage to that is that if the industry improves, if the inspectors have a better reputation, a better knowledge base, if we're more consistent in all of our markets, regardless of what it is, I think everybody benefits, especially the agents, because the agents don't know what we know. But if they can know the inspectors are consistent with things, it's like the agents that work with me and what I consider my peer groups know that we're going to find mold if it's present. We're going to call it out. If the foundation is bad, we're going to spot it. If there's water intrusion issues, we're going to catch it. It's not like, well, what's going to slide and what's not. So they know what they have to disclose. They know what they have to talk about. And a lot of them, even when they're walking through with the clients, they're able to point stuff out and going, okay, these are the inspectors that I refer, and he's probably going to say this about this, this, and this, because I've seen him say it before. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just a great thing. It takes a lot of the unknown out of what we do. So we walk up on a site, we inspect a building, and, let's be honest, sometimes the buyer's agent is more interested in making the transaction go through so that they can pay the mortgage that month than they are really at looking out for their client. So you can't assume that the buyer agent is going to watch out for them. But if you can consistently look out for your people, and that's the industry standard, is all the home inspectors are here, we're going to do a great job and we're going to watch out for our people. How is that not a win? For all of us.
Yeah. It's interesting because oftentimes, what's that expression? You don't know what you don't know?
Yeah.
So guys will oftentimes go through their entire career thinking they know enough until they meet somebody that knows more. And then it takes humility to acknowledge that somebody knows more. I'll give an example. I'm probably going to regret telling this one, but I do some volunteer work, and there was this building, and they hired a home inspector to come in and inspect it. Inspect it, said everything was fine, nothing really wrong with it. They found when they went in to occupy the building, there was a 4-inch gap on the second floor between the wall partition and the floor. And everybody's looking at it like, that's not right. So come to find out, the dryer vent vented into the second floor of this building. So, I mean, that's home inspection 101. You turn on the dryer and you make sure it goes outside. That's personally for me, I always check on that because I've found too many dryer vents going into attics and going into wall cavities. This was extreme. He didn't check. It was nothing in his report. So ended up having to rip out the entire second floor of this place, and it was a real mess. He owns a multi-inspector firm. It was the lead inspector. So I tried to talk with him. I'm like, oh hey, and I'm like, hey, we weren't making any promises or anything, but listen, I just want to talk to you. I don't know, whatever, and he just kind of moved on. He's going to run into a lot more problems because there's not going to be people that are as nice as me or the organization that I'm working with.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You don't know what you don't know. If we've never been mentored, we never mentor, we create people like that. We can create people that start multi-inspector companies that just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Him and all his inspectors, none of them are verifying that the dryer vent goes outside. Can you? I don't know. To me, that's just wild. That seems like just a very basic thing. Does the dryer vent go outside? Let's check that.
Well,
it takes 2 seconds.
Yeah, but the other side of this too is that our industry, it's a hard line of work to be in. I mean, every building is a unique combination of complex systems that are working against each other and with each other, and we have to figure out all of the intricate details, and we have to do it in a ridiculously short amount of time. Typically with an audience that's a high pressure, high emotion audience. Sometimes we've got people outright interfering with us, getting in the way, or actively sabotaging, or trying to conceal stuff. It's a really, really hard industry to be in. And, I'm going to be honest with you. When I started it, I'd never had as much respect for the inspection industry as I do after doing it for a couple of years. When I got into it, I'm like, oh, wow, this is actually a lot harder than I ever thought it was. And I've been in buildings for 25 years. So I've been fixing them and taking stuff apart, and I've got a good knowledge of a building. But when I had to start inspecting and making these decisions and putting everything together and doing it fast, that's the other thing. You can't take 8 hours to look at a building and figure out all the ins and outs. You got to move through. You got to have a system, and you got to do it quick. And you got to be right.
Yeah.
You just got to be right, too.
And you also have to know everything that's ever happened with that house, what's going on right now, and predict the future to a certain extent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to envision.
It's an intimidating job.
It is. You have to envision that house 365 days a year with all of the potential weather and seasons that can hit it, and the multiple variety of uses that people could put it through. Because let's be honest, the building that's currently occupied by the retiring couple who's downsizing and moving to Florida is going to be used very, very differently than the family of 6 moving in. So you've got to keep that in mind as you're inspecting too. It's a difficult line of work, and the guys coming into it, I think we could help them take years off their learning curve and improve our industry at the same time. So I'm all for it.
And I guess that's my point going back to that story. If a guy actually stops and learns from like you, goes and follows you on inspections, learns and takes that time, and somebody's willing to mentor them, it really lessens situations like that. It really lessens problems later on down the road. Buyers benefit. And again, going back to the morality of our industry is integral. You cannot outsource us to India. You cannot, punch us into ChatGPT and make us make reports. You need us.
Yeah.
And we are the pivot point in the decision-making process for 90% of the transactions out there. We affect people's lives. So if any profession needs to have mentoring, it's us. I think every state should be like Connecticut. You know how Connecticut works?
No, I don't.
They have a very rigorous program, so all of our listeners from Connecticut, I respect you. They actually do not have a ton of inspectors because it takes a while to become one. And then after you go through the program, I forget how many it is. It's quite a few. You have to do like 100 inspections, mentoring with another inspector, and you have to pay them to do that. I think that's a beautiful program because you get some great inspectors out of that. Guys know what they're looking at. They've been on live inspections. They know the process that you talked about. Oh, man, I really got to go in and I got to do this. And they're serious.
Yeah.
If you're going to put that much time, effort, and money into it, you have to be serious about your profession.
Oh, yeah. You have.
Whereas New York, New York, I mean, let's be honest about New York. I could take the test in my sleep. It's 100 questions?
Yeah.
You can find the answers online.
Yeah.
The course you can sleep through. It's really not much of anything to become an inspector in New York, and that's a licensed state. So now, if you're in, let's say, California, Georgia, or several others, you can just start inspecting one day because there's no licensing.
Yeah.
Now, let me caveat that because I don't think licensing is necessarily the answer to the problem, though. I think licensing actually makes the problem worse sometimes.
Well, so one of the guys I was working with, he got his mold assessment credentials because, like a lot of us do, he does home inspection, then he goes and gets his mold assessment credentials. I called him up. We were talking about something else, and I go, "Hey, I heard you're a mold assessor now, and I heard you got your license. What'd you think of the class?" And he shook his head and he said, "You know what?" He said, "They had a guy in there that's been doing this for years. He's been a licensed assessor. He's in our area. He's very well known. He's a great inspector. He was in there and he was talking with these guys, and he made the comment. He says, 'You know what? On paper, I have the same credentials now as that guy, but there's no way I'm even close to his caliber.'" And I thought, good. We got somebody that gets it. We got somebody that knows his limitations, that knows that he's just not, because he has that number. He is still not in the same caliber of class. And he's still reaching out and saying, "Hey, I need help with this," or "What about this?" He's going to go far. He's going to do well.
So I think that's the point. And I remember, just to talk to your point there, I remember when licensing came out, and I got my licensing when licensing came out in New York State, and there was this guy. He was an amazing inspector. He was one of the old school guys, didn't want to share his knowledge and stuff. But I tell you what, you followed him, like you saw one of his reports and did an inspection on the same house, you'd be like, "Man, this guy's good." But I had the same credentials as him.
Yeah.
I had just started, never done an inspection, and if I wanted to advertise at that time, I had the same exact credentials as him. Matter of fact, what I did was I went and joined Internashi and got a bunch of other credentials. Now I have more credentials than him. He had been inspecting for 25 years, was an engineer, and I had the same credentials as him. Crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't think licensing fixes things in that way. Because when there's no licensing, you have to live on your own merit. You have to work on your own merit. If you stink, the market's going to correct you out of that market. Whereas in a licensed state, if you stink, you still have a license and you can still say I have the same qualifications as Jay.
Yeah. Well, how many inspectors have you actually heard of ever losing their license in New York?
Oh, yep. I don't know if it's ever happened.
So I'm sure there's guys that should not be having a license. I've seen some reports and I've come behind guys and I'm like, this is nothing like the license criteria is. How can these guys legally inspect? So they're either super ignorant or they're unethical. And either way, shouldn't we address this as an industry? Shouldn't we push this up so that people go, especially the agents go, no, that's not how you're supposed to do a home inspection. You're going to do it like this guy, like this guy, like this guy. These guys are my inspectors. And when they mention your name in there, that's great. And then when they say you're the cream of the crop, you're the ones that are setting the standards, then these are the guys we're going to use, not you. I think that's where we got to go.
Well, and again, that goes back to not having licensing.
Yeah.
So if that's what I'm saying is you live on your own merit when there's no licensing. So the market will correct you out of the market. So there's no licensing for a lot of stuff in our state anyways.
Yeah.
So you have to be a licensed pilot. So You go in and the pilot's license is on the back of the seat, so you feel all warm and fuzzy. He could be flat out drunk or a terrible pilot. I don't know, but he's got a license, so I feel good about it.
Great. Yeah.
But now you go to
Somebody
you go to a
out of the
restaurant.
class.
Yeah, exactly. But you go to a restaurant. That guy's not a licensed chef. Is he cooking right or not? If the food comes out good and hot and pleasant, you go back. If not, you don't, and nobody goes back to that restaurant.
Yep.
So imagine if we all lived on merit.
Yep.
That's what an unlicensed state is. So that's why, if you start a home inspection company in California or Georgia, those are just the two that pop into my head that are unlicensed. You got to know your stuff. You have to be good. You have to get in there and be awesome. Otherwise, you're just going to be the restaurant nobody goes back to. Whereas if you have a license like in New York, yeah, I have the same license as Jay. Okay, cool. People get that warm, fuzzy feeling and they move on.
Yeah.
But there's no policing it.
Yeah, it can be very hard to police a licensed state. And that's, and his point, it was perfect. On paper, I have the same credentials as this guy, but there's no way I'm the same caliber. I'm like, exactly. So
I think the only state that does a really good job and a really bad job at the same time with policing is Texas with Trek.
Oh yeah,
they pass out fines like candy over there. I don't know how they for crazy things. I heard of one not too long ago where a Texas inspector did not write down weather stripping around a door, and he got a fine for that.
Really?
I'm like, I don't know how true that one is, but I've actually heard ones that I can actually verify, and I'm like, wow, okay, that's extreme, but at least it's keeping it in check. But for the most part, most of the licensed states are not.
That sounds like a pay-for-play kind of arrangement where they're just going to stick it to you, and this is the cost of doing business, and that's another conversation. Yeah. But
we could have a whole other podcast about licensing.
I think hand in hand with this is teaching. Like if you don't necessarily want to mentor people, are you qualified in a field where you could develop a class and help teach other home inspectors? I know we have a huge problem in New York finding quality teachers for continuing education for home inspectors. I've worked with a school for quite a while. They're always asking for more guys that are qualified, more guys that can teach classes. They're always asking if I'm willing to do more. I'm trying to do what I can with it. So I think if you're really qualified in a field, put together a class and see if you can help teach other guys too. Even if you don't want to do the mentoring, take 2 days a year and go and help teach some of your peers. And then this other side of that is instead of sitting through continuing ed, it's just something you have to do to satisfy the state. If you're going to be in the continuing ed, participate, contribute, add experiences, see if you can do something to, again, there's a situation where you can help teach others in the class. One of the things I've always really enjoyed when I was teaching is taking an ethical question like, all right, well flows. How many guys in here do well flows? Do you get a bunch of hands go up? What's your standard? What's your standard? What's your standard? Why is that? And have them just go through and defend it. You can have a half an hour, 45-minute conversation about why all these different guys are doing it a different way, but what's their justification? And everybody walks out of that environment with something new to think about, a new perspective, and something that they can try and say, oh yeah, what I'm doing is really, really good compared to these other four guys, or wow, I need to really kick this up. So I really encourage guys that know what they're doing and that have been in it for a while to take up the teacher's mantle in a formal sense and an informal sense.
And let's be honest, it's that old proverb of I am a student of all men.
Yeah.
Basically, there's something that you can learn from everyone. So whenever I've taken anybody on site with me or taught a class, I've always come back. There's not one time that I can think of where I didn't come back and say, wow, I didn't know that. I learned something. I would even start my classes out like that. Like, I've always learned something from these classes because somebody brings something up. I remember one of my last classes with the preformed concrete foundations. I learned something about the gravel depth that has to be underneath each one of those preformed foundation blocks. Not CMUs, but actually the preformed foundations. I won't get into it. A whole nother podcast. But I remember just standing there looking at the guy, and I Googled it real quick, and I'm like, I love you. How did I never know that about the gravel depth? And everybody's looking at me kind of like the agents in the room, because there's agents and home inspectors mixed, and they're like, why are you so enthralled with this gravel thing? But I'm like, this is just amazing. We learn something from people. Everybody has something to bring to the table.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
What's your niche? Are you an electrician? Cool. Tell everybody about some electrical stuff that we might be missing.
Yeah.
You know, did you install solar panels? Great. I'd love to know, why do you guys put the brackets in underneath the shingles but put the screw through the top of the shingle? Explain to everybody why that happens. You know? That's the best way to do it. That's how everybody learns from you.
Yeah, it's a good way of learning. Take up a formal class. And I'm going to tell you what, if you really want to test your knowledge as an inspector, stand up in front of 8 to 20 other guys that do it day in and day out. And you'll see whether you know something.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was one of the real intimidating. Frankly, that's just scared the snot out of me. It's like, I'm going to get up in front of these guys that know way more than I do it. I'm going to tell these guys how to do it. But I had enough to share. And my attitude is just this. I'll teach until someone better comes along, till someone more qualified comes along. Then I'll step aside. And I'm good with that. But till then, this is what I got to offer. Let's see if we can all take something out of it. And I have found, honestly, that if you approach the class situation with that attitude, guys have loved it. They know it's going to be worth their time. They're going to get to participate. They're going to walk away with something. It's not just going to be sitting there wasting time and money so that they satisfy some state requirement. It's going to be the day was at least worth their time to be there. And that says a lot, too. So just start teaching. Share your knowledge. We have to do it. I think we have to.
So there's yeah, no, I'm in 100% agreement. So if we are an old school home inspector, or we just have any kind of experience, think about mentoring.
Yeah.
Next time some guy calls you, or we see some guy in the Facebook forums or on Nashi forum or whatever saying, hey, is anybody in XYZ city willing to let me do a ride along? Jump in. Say, yeah, why don't you come and talk with me? If we're a new guy, consider asking around. I'll be honest with you, it's not easy. If your area, the guys don't want to share the secrets, cool, but also think about your approach. You know, do you want to go in there and like interrupt the inspection, or, you know, just ask too many questions or demand information? Or are you going to be like, hey, listen, let me be your lackey. Let me plug in some outlet testers and open and close windows for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then let them pour out the knowledge. Either way, approach it the right way. One thing I will say is that these mentorships and things like that just don't happen. They have to be made. Yeah. I've never taken anybody on site that I didn't know well or meet in person and talk to them first. I don't want some guy sitting there with his shirt untucked, unshowered, wearing the Yankees cap, putting his cigarette out in the person's living room. Yep. You show up, we have lunch together, or we'll talk. I want to know you first.
Yeah. And
so that's the same thing.
That's a great point for the new guys. I have standards. I have high standards. I take just everybody along with me, and that's something maybe we should throw out there too. I screen the guys that I'm going to take, and it's at least a couple of conversations with them, and usually at least an hour face to face, sometimes more. And it goes through, okay, if you're coming with me, do you have a realistic understanding of what you're getting into? This is what's expected. This is how I expect you to behave. And it's everything. Like you said, you're going to brush your teeth. You know, you're not going to show up over. You're going to comb your hair, tuck in your shirt. You know, this is the way we present. This is how we do it. You want to learn? This is the standard we hold to. And frankly, there have been some guys that I've said, no, we're not going to be a good fit. And I've had to say, I'm not gonna do this. But a lot of the guys that have approached me have been real serious about it. They wanted to do it. They take the feedback. They show up. They listen to what I tell them. There's one guy showed up in a Boston Red Sox hat, and I said, "Don't ever do that again." You know, you might come across the Yankees. That's the last thing I need. So, and he just didn't know. Didn't think about it. You know, this is what he did, and he didn't do it again. So, they got to be willing to toe the line too. Because if you are going to mentor somebody, you're going to help groom them. You are, to some degree, putting your stamp on them. I don't particularly encourage people to trade on my name. So that's something we don't encourage. So they don't get to say, yeah, I learned with Jay and this and that. They don't get to play off Blue Jay. They don't get to piggyback off my anything that I've built. I expect them to build their own, and we make that very, very clear to them too. So I have standards for the guys coming up. And the thing I'm going to say is that most of the guys that really want to do it, they're going to be in the industry anyway. And I just, like you said, good guys coming up, they're going to be your competition one way or the other. Groom them, get them on your side, help them start, improve our industry, show them how pricing structure works, talk to them about liability. This is how you avoid being sued. This is how you run a business. And then you have a successful guy who's not coming into the market charging a third of your price so that he can have some kind of market share and cutting everybody's throat. And he doesn't know anything. It's just a good move.
I think that's probably one of the best points so far. One of the biggest gripes that we have is the death of our industry because we don't charge enough. We make less now than we ever have in the existence of our industry if you take in inflation.
Oh, yeah.
So the average inspection fee now is slightly higher than it was in 1996 still. So that's the dollar amounts, which means we make about 40 to 50% less than we did in the 90s. So, teach them that stuff.
Yeah.
A guy that's well-equipped, confident, has the software they need, has the knowledge they need, will go out and charge a fair price. So we won't sit in our living room griping about the guy that charges $200, $250 for a full home inspection when we're $450, $500.
Yeah. Control
the narrative. That's kind of, it helps build our industry. It's going to encourage more guys like that.
Yeah, I think
so. Agents and buyers are always like, oh man, it's hard to find a good home inspector. Well, it won't be if we charge enough. Because guys that are worth their money will go into other industries to make more money where they know they can get that rather than stay in home inspection. So we want to keep really good guys in the industry. Let's show them. Here's a pricing structure. Costs you $125 to get out of bed, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you work that into your cost. Spend a lot of time with your clients. Spend a good amount of time writing your report. And you'll have a successful business, happy clients, and it'll just go well.
Yeah. So I think, it's a win-win-win situation all the way around for everybody. It's worked for me. I enjoy it. I've seen no blowback, and I've seen absolutely nobody has cut into my business. My book is full. My inspection fee is high. I'm doing really good at what I do. I have more work than I can handle. Just share it with people. Share what you know.
I think that's a beautiful point. You have one of the highest inspection fees in our area, if not the highest. You are one of the busier home inspectors in our area, and you have a full calendar, and you don't really have any problems with other inspectors. You're a good example of why we should get into mentoring and helping other inspectors. So I tell you what, Jay, I'm out of Lagavulin. I don't know how you're doing on yours, but I think that's a good end to our podcast. Thank you so much for being on. Drinking with Jay, one of my favorite segments. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk a little shop and just share some ideas.
Yeah, same here. You have a great night, and sorry for the knock-knock joke at the beginning.
No, you're not.
I think it was worth it. No, I'm not. I was good with it. Have a good night, Jay. Thank you very much. Bye.